Hello and welcome to another special Vote for Women edition of WIF's Laptop Cinema Club. This is the series where we talk to the dynamic women making the media you love. I'm Ebony Adams, and I am delighted to be talking today to an incredible team of women from the long-running Comedy Central juggernaut that mixes incisive political commentary with razor-sharp comedy sensibility, The Daily Show. Please welcome supervising producer Elise Terrell, producers Jocelyn Conn and Brittany Radocha, writer Kat Radley, and researcher and assistant to Trevor Noah, Chelsea Williamson. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so let's get right into things. And I want to talk to, the producers here, especially because you've been with the show, must have been with the show for so long. And the genius of The Daily Show is that it's the product of a team effort. And that's been apparent from the very beginning. So how do you and the rest of the producers work with, the showrunner, Jen Flunz, to juggle all the numerous elements that go into making the show what it is?
We always say that it's a major team effort, and that sounds like so like a cop out, but it really is so many people that are contributing to various aspects of the show. So we have teams of people that are working on today's show, this moment, and then we have teams of people that are working on the deeper dive, longer lead, more heavily researched pieces. And then we have also, our package segment team that works on getting all of the material together for packages that we just roll in. So we try to keep it really mobile in terms of how we are telling these stories and really diversifying the types of humor that we're using and the various media that are available to us, whether it's going on social media, if it's strictly a digital piece, or Trevor telling, straight to camera in-house in our studio in front of our audience. So it's really a mix of everyone having their own part, but also working together very collaboratively with the various voices at the show to move material forward.
That's awesome. And Brittany and Jocelyn, I'd love your take on this too. And especially, an idea of how you're actually working with those various teams to preserve that through line so that it seems like The Daily Show, no matter what you're watching, despite all of the disparate elements that go into it.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of the day-to-day, like we make a show every day, like Monday through Thursday, we are we get into work, we make the show, and it allows, I think, for us to kind of hone that process every day. And like everyone has their hand in it. Like we all touch base all day, every day. We're all like talking to each other about what each one of us is doing. There's like a great communication that goes on every day to kind of like get us all on the same page. And, a lot of things overlap. And like you were saying before, we've been working with each other for so long. We kind of have like these shorthands, like, when you're creating this like system every day, it like at a certain point, it's just like second nature, like I know when to talk to Elise and when to talk to Brittany and when to talk to Chelsea. And like, we kind of have this like unspoken system, like all like built into us, honestly. But I think part of, because of that system, like it really like lets us all be on the same page about things. And it comes from the top. It comes from Trevor. Trevor, comes in every day and he knows what he wants to say. And we kind of like, we work with him and take what he says and kind of like show him some other stuff. So it's kind of like, we're all like working on what the vision is every day. And we're all kind of on the same page about it because of the way we work.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that vision, I think, is so broad. I think one of the cool things of The Daily Show is that we have everyone knows the voice of the show and everyone is working towards a collective goal. So a really unique part about The Daily Show is we're not just on the show. We're not just making a show every night. We're doing events, we're doing digital. I mean, it is like a 24/7. We have so much content going out all the time. And the great thing is that we work with such a strong team that is constantly pitching, is constantly working. I mean, the work ethic of everyone on staff is like incredible, absolutely incredible. And so it's a team effort, and it's not just, it just like blows my mind of how much we put out and the quality that we put out. And I think that really speaks to the talent of everyone on staff.
I'll wake up at 6 a.m. with a pitch idea and just send it out. Like, it is like a total 24/7 thing.
Yeah. And the news is 24/7 now too. So
Right,
we're all constantly, I mean, I'm getting alerts, like we're commenting on our social accounts. We're writing pitches for longer lead things. Like there's constantly, like, the cycle is so relentless at this point in time. It's like, when is it going to stop?
Actually, that's a great question. Like, how do you prevent overwhelm, right? You know, because you have to be so hyper focused 24/7 while the show is in production. And I, would assume that even when the show is not in production, it must be kind of difficult to sort of shut that brain off. How do you, like, personally sort of deal with disconnecting while still remaining like, an awake citizen of the country that you exist in?
Well, I can only speak to my personal experience, but I actually think, I mean, obviously we like taking hiatuses, we like having a little bit of a break, but working for the show, it is like all of the things that are happening in the news. Our work is such a great way to work through some of those things. So, we have so much, the protests last year, COVID, going through a pandemic. I mean, we all were going through those things in the world, and working on the Daily Show, it's like, what are we going to do? Just hole up and be stuck by ourselves in our thoughts? Like, going to work and being able to talk about these things with people, that is kind of a catharsis for us, or for me at least.
Yeah. Yeah, especially getting to deal with them in a humorous way. It's not just, we're not just talking about, so like Brittany mentioned during, that I think we disconnect, but and it's, it's nice, like Brittany said, to have a break, but it's also, I think we're so lucky in the fact that we get to do things where there's things going on in the world that we want to relate to, we want to respond to, and there are no other shows that have the diversity of talent like ours. So we know that we're the only ones that can tell some of these stories. So when we're on break and something major happens, we jump on social, because we're the ones that have to be responding and reacting to these things and connecting with our audience in that way.
So let's talk to some of the talent, that you've mentioned. So Kat, you're a writer on the show. I would love to hear.
Let's talk to
the
the
writers'
talent,
room.
please.
I would love to hear how the writers' room at the Daily Show might differ from other rooms that you've been in, or maybe that your peers are in. And, if you could also talk about, like, what do you think is the primary element about the way that writers' room is run that allows you to do your best work?
That's one thing that I love. I mean, all the writers, it's kind of like cliche to say, but like, we all get along really well and have fun, which is an important part of the job, because you build jokes together. Like, you might throw out an idea, and then someone, picks it up and comes up with the punchline. And it's so nice being back in the office now because we are discovering we do write different and better jokes when we are together. And it's people always ask too, like, how do you write the show in one day? Like, don't you get nervous? What if you don't get it in time? And I'm like, I know that there's so many funny writers on staff, and like, let's say we need a joke for maybe a really difficult story, or this is a story everyone's covering. We want to make sure we're telling the joke that no other show is telling.
Right.
There's like so many very talented writers. I'm never worried. I know we're gonna find the joke, and I know we're gonna get it done because there's so many of us, and like one of us will get it, or maybe three of us with our brains combined will get it. And that's always like such a fun thing to experience, to see like what the script is at the end of the day from what it was at the beginning of the day, how the jokes like have evolved, which jokes are just killer and just stay in till the very end from like morning till taping. So it's very fun and collaborative. I often feel guilty when people are like, thank you for the Daily Show, you guys are doing a public service. And I'm like, I get to tell dick jokes with really funny people all day. Like, don't thank me for that. Like, I feel it's very fun. But I mean, it's obviously very rewarding. I love that we get to touch on these stories and also have some significance and impact with the show. But I also love that Trevor likes to be silly, and like he is a stand-up, he loves jokes. So it's always like, he's like, let's find a way to get a joke here. Maybe the story isn't like, we're not going to do jokes today for certain stories that just people aren't ready to laugh at yet. But for the most part, he's always like, we got to find a way to inject fun and silly into the show, because that's why we're here. It's a comedy show. Like, we're here to make people laugh as well as to think.
Chelsea, The Daily Show, it's The Daily Show, right? So your work as a researcher, especially, has got to be so crucial to the smooth running of the show. I would love for you to talk a little bit about like, how extensive is the general research process? I recognize that there are some deep dives, there are some things that you do much more quickly, but on average, what is the research process like? How much freedom do you have to sort of like pick a topic and think, yeah, I'm gonna follow this through, figure out, whether there's an angle here, and then pitch it up higher?
Yeah, so we normally start off with either Trevor will have an idea and kind of relay it to us, and then we start, trying to research it as best as we can. Normally it does take a couple of days, and it's a lot of very long files of just like transcribing footage and news that like relate to it, and then figuring out how best to thread the actual story. But a lot of the times the ideas come from the research team ourselves and the rest of our topical assignments group department. So most of the time we're pitching a lot of the ideas that we either see something in the news, or it's just something that we've kind of even just noticed throughout our life, or just something that we think is kind of just in the ether. And we'll have a perspective, maybe we'll have a correspondent in mind to do it, or we'll think it's great for Trevor to kind of just get a bunch of eyes on it. And we normally like go from there. I think the biggest thing for us is really just having a solid perspective of how we're going to cover it, because to what Elise was saying before, we are in a unique position compared to a lot of other shows, just because of who our host is, just because of our like correspondence. We can get into a lot of depth and just get into a lot of things that maybe other people can't, or in just a different way that others wouldn't. So I would say like that's probably like the biggest thing with us, is just coming in with a solid like POV.
One of my favorite segments was one that I believe you pitched, and it was about being Black in the workplace.
Yeah.
And, one that you did with the incredible, Roy Wood and Cristiano and Bakwe Medina. So I love that you got to pitch that, and the higher up said, yes, let's take this and run with it. Are there other stories like that, or angles like that you've got coming up? Are there things that perhaps the Daily Show has not had as much time to tackle that you would love to see in future?
I will say that it's really exciting that we're starting to do a lot more AAPI stories. We just started a whole new segment with Ronnie. And like, I'm very excited that we're going to start getting to work more and more on that. The first one that we did was all about Asian American Pacific Islander athletes, and just their experiences in sports, which I feel like people don't talk about. I think as we get like further and further into looking into more specific, like what I would say, like either subcultures or just like more niche things, that's always like where the fun is, I feel like, because we can get into a lot of things that others aren't talking about or that just aren't being covered as much as they should be.
Right.
And I think also the fact that not only our on-camera talent is so diverse, but like behind the scenes on every team, we have such a wonderful representation of gender, of race, of nationality. And so when we say, stories, we always say that stories can come from anywhere. And so everyone at the show is open to pitch ideas. And because Trevor and the executive team is so, and Jen Flans, our showrunner in particular, are so open to hearing the stories that we are passionate about as staffers. And so, there's a lot of times, Chelsea often pitches things that I have never heard of, thought of, known about. It comes from all over. It comes from all members of our team that have such diverse backgrounds. And because Trevor is interested in telling the stories that we care about, we're getting stuff on the air that no one else is thinking about, talking about, knows about, understands. Right. And it depends, depending on how we want to tell the story, whether it's a correspondent doing a sort of explainer scripted piece, or if it's Trevor at the desk. And sometimes it's just a story that Trevor's excited to talk about. And so we do a between the scenes segment where he's just sort of talking to the audience, and that goes out digitally. It always depends on what the type of story is when we are determining how we want to tell it. But it's so wonderful that we have these opportunities to tell stories that we as people behind the scenes really, really are very passionate about. And we're hearing from our friends and other people in our lives. These are stories that people are excited to hear. And so it's not just a bunch of people in a room coming up with these ideas. It's like Kat was saying, it's this big collaborative team of writers and producers, and the ideas really just come from anywhere. And having a team of such diversity is so important.
And where else are you going to see a segment on the history of the female orgasm on screen? Because that was a Desi piece during Women's History Month.
That.
No one else is doing that.
Okay, so The Daily Show is this really like captivating mix of scripted and unscripted, right? So I would love to hear, Jocelyn, Elise, Brittany, like, what are the most kind of persistent challenges that you face, producing this like nonstop piece of media, maybe surprising challenges that people don't, assume would be a hurdle. And then, I'd love to hear like some of the ways that you found to overcome those things that perhaps, again, people wouldn't expect.
My world is kind of the digital arm of the show. So we are looking at, our social media, but also like other ideas, other ways to expand the show. And I think like a challenge for our department and specifically is kind of where this commentary is going to fit. Would it just be a Twitter joke? Do we want to throw it to the show for like an on-air segment? Do we want to, turn this into an activation space? We're constantly kind of just faced with the question, and it's a challenge, but also like a really fun thing to do is kind of figure out how we present this joke or how we present this take or point of view. What would be the most effective way? I mean, there's always the outlet of Twitter or social media or a montage or even just like a headline, but there's so many other ways to be creative with your comedy. And I think a challenge is like pushing yourself out of that, normal space and seeing like, how else can this be presented? We created an entire library dedicated to Donald Trump's tweets instead of just, a retweet with a joke about one of his dumb tweets. But like we created monuments to the heroes of the insurrection. So we're just, a challenge being like trying to figure out how to tell this effectively and and just so people laugh, we're ultimately a comedy show. And so we're trying to find comedy everywhere and trying to just present that in the right way.
You're being humble, but the expansion team kills it. Like the ideas and stuff you guys come up with, like they're like, all right, writers, we have this idea, we're gonna do this sketch. We know it's Friday, we don't have a show, but it's the opening ceremony of the Olympics and these outfits are ridiculous. Dulce has to roast them. So we're like, okay, got it. We do it, we put it out on social because it's like too funny to ignore. And some of the funniest stuff comes from our expansion team. It's great.
It's really fun. I mean, everybody's contributing to it, especially when it's not like, everybody's always contributing to it, but like, some days we are on hiatus and or like a Friday or weekend or whatever, but like, we know when we want to say something and, it's coming from all over the staff.
Right.
Any ideas?
Yeah. So Kat, that leads me to ask this question, like, what sort of writers are good in the room or on the team, and I guess I'm trying to
name
names.
But like, what kind of advice would you give to emerging comedy writers, who've been, going through the slog, submitting like packets after packet, to room after room, who really want to be comedy writers for maybe a show like The Daily Show, or, but what does it take? What kind of sensibility do you need to bring? What kind of skills, do you need to have in your back pocket to succeed on a show like this?
I think definitely joke writing, like being able to write a really good joke. I do stand up, and stand up is a great way to like write your own jokes and kind of get them out into the world. We have plenty of writers that aren't stand-ups. They're very introverted and do not want to get in front of a microphone. I would say like any way you can get the practice in, whether it's like finding a group of people to write with, share jokes with each other, write headlines and give each other feedback. Really just the practice, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And depending which show you want to write for, but with our show, you really want to know what the voice of the show is. So like when I was submitting packets, I just like binge watched The Daily Show to like get, Trevor's voice in my head. Watch get Ronnie's voice in my head, because all the correspondents are so different and you do have to like shift from one voice to another. There's jokes that Michael Coste is gonna say that Dulce would never say. So having that skill to be able to write jokes, not for yourself, but for other people, and being able to like imitate those voices is definitely a skill you want to like hone and practice.
Yeah, Elise, I see you nodding there, and the other producers as well. Do you have something you can add there about like, who are you looking for? What sort of talent, are you looking for when you're staffing the show?
So it really varies greatly. So I manage the packages team that deals with is responsible for the packaged segments that go on the show. So I'm hiring segment directors and producers, and in those cases, it's really important for us to see people that just have a really strong comedy point of view, and it doesn't have to be a particular point of view. It just has to be very strong and personal. So when I'm looking at reels, I like to see that, people are bringing their own clever, creative point of view to the material that they are presenting. And in terms of, some of the other positions that we hire for we really, such a big part of it is people that have their finger on the pulse of what's happening and are excited to tell the stories that we are telling. So whether it's someone that has a really big TikTok presence, or someone that is funny, really, like very clever on Twitter in a way that we haven't seen. We're looking for new types of voices and things that really just make us laugh, people that make us laugh, so that collaborate with other people to figure out the way to make the joke the funniest. We're really looking for people that can just show us how strong and how funny they are, and how the things that are happening around them can be processed in a comedic way.
I think that's really gratifying to hear, because for so many hopefuls, the expectation is, and the message is, if you haven't been in 7 writers' rooms before, you're not going to get into one. So how do you even get into that first room? So knowing that, you are actively looking for people who perhaps are, new to the game, but who, as you say, have an established voice, have an established perspective, means that you can diversify more quickly and more deeply than the traditional, 27-year-old white dude who got a job right out of USC, and has been working steady ever since.
This was my first writer's room. So I was a high school teacher, and I remember when I interviewed, I went to bring a resume, be like, do you want my teaching resume? And Trevor was like, no, I don't think I need that. And I was like, okay. But yeah, it's really they're just looking for the talent. You don't have to have, written for the Onion for 10 years to work here. It's you can have any kind of background or experience if you have the voice and the perspective and the talent they're looking for.
And I think the beauty about today's media landscape, I mean, it's a blessing and a curse, but you can make content with your iPhone and your friends, and you can put it on your social media accounts. And if it's funny, people will watch it. And it you just have this platform that I feel was not always there. And just accessibility, I guess, to making content yourself and putting it out there.
Yeah.
I remember Trevor saying, when we were looking to hire for some various positions, he made a comment about how, it's hard to get in the room if you haven't been in the room.
Exactly.
And so we really look for people that haven't been in the room. And that's a lot of times it's women, it's people of color, it's LGBTQ people, it's people, it's people who haven't had the opportunity, don't have the connections that the other guys have, maybe don't have the fancy degree from the fancy school that somebody has. It's really important from Trevor down that we're looking at people who maybe have not been in the room before. And that brings such a freshness to our process and to our conversation, to the stories that we're telling, because it's not the same people telling the same stories, telling the same jokes. And so that's really something that is very deeply ingrained in us when we are looking to expand the show.
Yeah. Like I said, it's so gratifying to hear. And it's such an, interesting kind of and vital corrective to this myth that you're hearing now that, oh, white men can't get jobs because, they're all going to women, they're all going to people of color, which we know is factually incorrect. There will always be a cabal of, dudes from the Harvard Lampoon who get hired and then hired their friends, right? But the opportunities are so narrow for people of marginalized genders and races and other identity categories. So that's the fact that a show with this kind of prestige and lineage is leading by example in that way is phenomenal. So kudos to all of you for being part of that. Okay, so before we wrap it up, I would love to hear from each of you about what is your favorite show just from this past season, this past year. It can be one that you found the funniest. It can be maybe something that was just particularly thought-provoking, moving, something that you're really proud of having put on the air. But I would just, love to hear from you. This was a high point. And anyone can go first.
One that comes to mind is the day that the memo dropped that we found out that Roe v. Wade might be overturned. And I think a lot of us at work were it was a tough day, that's a tough news to hear. And Desi's monitor wall bit, where typically our correspondents go out with Trevor during our acts, and they're supposed to talk about the weather, or talk about the traffic, or some of their local news, and they always get sidetracked, and it becomes this funny bit between the two of them. And on this particular day, she was doing the weather, and states were on fire. And it wasn't necessarily a funny segment. It was just a very honest conversation that they got to have. And it was, it was just one of those days where it's like, I feel very grateful to work at the place that I do, because we can look at that and say, like, the world might be burning around us, but at least we can talk about it. And like Elise was saying before, really that can really resonate with our audience. And I think a lot of our audience was feeling the exact same way that day. Having a voice like Desi on the show that can speak to that kind of issue. It's not, you know, having Trevor is wonderful, but he's brought on these other voices that can really authentically speak to that. So that was, I don't know if it's my favorite day, but it was helpful, at least for me.
Yeah, I love that. Chelsea, what about you?
I would say actually the episode where I believe Trevor started off, the headline for that day was all about the Kim Kardashian Kanye West situation, where he was really speaking to the fact that just because somebody is very wealthy and a white woman and basically, you know, the top of the proverbial social status totem pole, that does not mean that she too can experience violence. And him being able to hammer home that point, which I know that he like co-wrote it with one of our writers, Christiana Mbakwe Medina. And it was just kind of one of those situations where I think you could see the collaboration really come to a head, because he was thinking one thing, and then after speaking with her and speaking with some of the other people, you know, he kind of got he was able to give a very different perspective. And he was also able to inject his own personal history into it, which I think made it even more powerful. And I feel like that's one of our like best headlines, I would say, just because of that, because it was something that people normally take and see it as superficial, and we made it something that was nuanced and said, no, this is something you need to be paying attention to.
I love that. Kat, what about you?
My memory doesn't go back much further than a week ago, but I was actually one of my favorite ones, which was very fun to write, especially over the past 2 years when the news is so dark so often. Whenever we're able to like have a silly news story or something that we can really just have fun with, is just kind of a nice release. And we did an award show for like heroes of the pandemic, and we like presented it as if it was like, you know, like the Oscars, and we had different nominees for each category, like best performance, losing your shit on a plane, and things like that.
Right.
And it was just super fun, because it was just like rolling clips of everyone who was terrible during the pandemic, and just getting to make fun of them, but with the tone of honoring them, being like, this person deserves this award because, you know, I've never seen anyone wear their mask below, you know, there's whatever it was. But it was just fun to just roast these people, but in this very fun framing of honoring them.
Yeah, I love that. Elise, what about you?
One of my favorite segments that we've done recently was a sketch called Black Karen, which reimagined, you know, the Karen as a Black woman calling the cops on white people for innocuous offenses. And it, you know, it's sort of like what Kat was saying. It's sometimes we just get to have fun with pieces, but it also was a segment that did speak to a real issue and something that is very is terrible. And it was a fun way to allow Dulce Sloan, our correspondent, to play and have fun with the concept of her being in the role of Karen. And so getting to spoof, like, you know, it was a sort of movie trailer version of what this might look like. And it's just, it's a great example of a lot of the departments coming together. It was both, it was fully scripted, and we had some elements of actual Karens in the world that was, you know, pulled together from our topical assignment group team. So it really was, and then the package segment team executed it. So it was just a great example of just all hands on deck, bringing a story to life in a fun, silly way.
I love that. All right, Jocelyn, take us home. What was your favorite?
That was definitely one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And then we had it in the hopper for a while, and I'd watched it like so many times, and I still laughed when we played it. I was just thinking a lot about just one of my favorite things about the show in general is the conversations Trevor has with people. I think we're all used to, late night guests being celebrities and musicians, and we have all that, but like, I think I'm always really interested when he has conversations with people about things that you wouldn't normally see on a late night show. I really enjoyed the conversation he had with Chris Smalls, the Amazon, the union founder. Yeah. And I just like, there's something about Trevor really knows how to talk to people. And I'm constantly surprised by like, I'll see a guest on our schedule and I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Like I might not know much about them. And I'm surprised how I'm pulled into the conversation the way like Trevor really has a way of talking to people. And if any of you guys can think of any other really exciting, smaller ones that I'm not thinking of right now, but that was probably like one of my favorites recently that comes to the top of my mind, although I have a million. I also don't remember anything past like that.
That's fantastic. This has been a really just great conversation. I've been such a huge fan of The Daily Show from, I think, the beginning, and watching the evolution of this show and the different iterations of it. But the fact that the quality has remained so high, and in fact, it has just gone from strength to strength. It's just a testament to like, whoa, the incredible talent behind the camera, behind the scenes. So kudos to all of you. Thank you so much for being here, for talking a little bit about how the show is made. We wish you all the best of luck during this Emmy season and beyond. I know you're not doing it for the awards, but you deserve all of them. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. It was great to talk to you.